For this one, he's been quite confused about his career, and I mean it in a good way, because he says that either he is an accidental editor who strayed into publishing from a career in finance and accounts, or he's an accidental finance person who found his calling in publishing. Now, as the editor at HarperCollins Publishers India and Penguin Books India, he set up the copy editorial team and helped launch what came to be regarded as the go-to cinema, music, and culture list in Indian publishing. And at present, he is editor-in-chief at Om Books International. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to invite on the dais Shantanu Ray Chaudhary. Please give it up with a loud, loud, loud round of applause. Welcome, Shantanu. Thank you so much. Well, I'll refrain from getting up because too much to handle at the moment. So I'll just welcome you sitting like this. And I also need to tell you that he spent 2 books, Whims, a book of poems, which has been published by Writers Workshop, and Icons from Bollywood, published by Penguin Puffin. So let's applaud to that as well. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for our next guest on the panel. So she's an award-winning senior publishing professional and the founder of Market My Book, a leading publicity and digital marketing agency for writers and publishers. And she's also the founder of Indic Pen, an exclusive speakers forum. She's headed marketing at HarperCollins India for about 7 years, and she has contributed to an anthology in Hindi. And at present is writing a children's book on historical figures, which is slated to release in early 2024. Welcome, Lipika. Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Lipika Bhushan, founder, Market My Book, and also, apart from this moderator-speaker relationship, she happens to be my super senior from school. We went to Birla Vidya Niketan, so I have a senior and it's a pleasure to be in conversation with her. Thanks a lot. So, I think, we're talking about book business, and we're talking about how to market your book, how to become a successful author. So let's start by understanding the reader base, right? Because that's what our market is. Now, more people are writing books, more people are diving into the art of writing. So as a result, perhaps we have a lesser number of readers as compared to before. I think let's start with you, Shantanu. How do you think that the reader base that we have today has evolved or has changed for us to look at and understand?
First of all, thank you, Literati, for having me here. Thank you, Niharika, for the very warm introduction. And if I fail in any way at this conversation, the blame is on Lipika. She got me, a non-marketing person, to talk about marketing books, and it can't get any worse than that. But then she's a marketing professional, and it shows that she actually cajoled me into this is her marketing triumph. So as far as readership base goes, I think from my perspective, I think we haven't had it better. Mm-hmm. There's a huge readership out there. Mm-hmm. It's undeniable that this country is actually full of people who can read and who want to read. The problem is that I think there's a lot of the writing, the material that is being provided to them, particularly in the last 15-20 years when publishing has become much more democratic, in the sense of now you don't have to depend on a publisher. Mm-hmm. If you think you have a book in you, you can publish on your own. You don't need a publisher to. So what that has done is actually, in many ways, it's made it democratic, but it's lowered the standards.
Absolutely.
There's very little editorial look into a manuscript. Mm-hmm. आज कोई किताब किसी well-known publisher के पास आती है, there's a whole rigorous process of editing, cover design, a very well thought out process. Not that all publishers are following that diligently, but there is.
Broadly.
But
right,
broadly there's something, I have been part of books where a book was just a very basic idea with very rudimentary writing, but editorially उस पे काम करके you have one builds it up to a level that, so I think that's a major problem. There are too many people writing too many mediocre books,
Right.
not only mediocre books. So that's the reason why, during the pandemic, for example, when everything closed, when everything was shut down, book business almost was wiped out. This has been the hardest hit business during the pandemic. The one section of books that did remarkably well are the classics. So, the Jane Austens and the Charles Dickens and the Leo Tolstoys, they went on and that has continued even after 3 years after the pandemic, which is something we don't see in the new writing, particularly new writing in English. I'm not so aware of the Hindi trade. I'm aware of the Bengali trade, which of course is again very robust. बहुत ही बढ़िया work. There's a lot of good work happening in Bengal, and that's because the reading and the writing culture there is entirely different. It's a very, very strong culture out there, which is probably not the case on a pan-India level. So I think that's been the major problem. There's a huge readership, but the problem of choice, like what you are giving them, what a number of these self-published or, the kind of books that we see, mass markety books. I don't have anything against mass markety books. Some of them have done remarkably well, but yes, there's a problem there in terms of readers actually investing time and money in this, in the new set of books that are coming out.
Absolutely. I think, with more people writing, like you mentioned, and more people writing mediocre stuff for lack of a better word. So perhaps the way we are reading is also changing. And, on that note, Lipika, I'd like to hear from you what your thoughts are on this, on the reader versus the writer today.
Firstly, thank you for inviting me here. Thanks to Sumita ji and the CLS team. They've taken tremendous care of us. I was here since yesterday listening into a lot of insightful sessions, and something caught my attention which will answer your question as well is the conversations around Punjabi and the language, and language in particular, why youngsters are not taking to their own mother tongues and all. So to answer your question on readership, I would slightly disagree with Shantanu Dahiya, and that's primarily from a marketing perspective. He looks at things from an editorial end. I will be more practical, if I may take the liberty of saying so, to talk from a marketing angle. See, I was in Bombay for my post-graduation, my MBA. I did my MBA there. And I realized वहाँ मुझे ये ज़्यादा realization हुआ that there is a product for everybody, and there is a consumer for every product. So वहाँ सड़क किनारे भी जो प्रोडक्ट बिक रहा है उसके लिए भी कंज्यूमर है, और जो बहुत हाई फ्लैशी 5-star होटल्स में बिक रहा है उसके लिए भी एक कंज्यूमर है. एंड आई लुक एट इट फ्रॉम दैट पर्सपेक्टिव. तो while I might partially agree on the content and it not keeping up to the quality levels, but I also feel that there is a reader for that content, and that is the reason why that content is out there and is being read. Today we are only looking at content from a book's perspective, whereas content, if you look at it, is much larger a landscape. And there is a reader for all kinds of content. The only difference is that हम पब्लिशिंग में जहाँ किताबों की बात आती है, probably what we are doing is we are not target marketing it right. We are putting out books for everybody. If you ask a writer, he'll say मेरी किताब सबके लिए है, आपकी किताब सबके लिए नहीं है. That is the beginning of the marketing understanding of how you're going to target your book. आज सब लोग लिख रहे हैं, लेकिन बुक बिजनेस के बारे में सुनने के लिए कितने लोग हैं? बिकॉज इफ यू डोंट अंडरस्टैंड द बिजनेस यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू फाइंड योर वेज सक्सेसफुली अराउंड इट.
Absolutely.
एंड दैट इज द प्रॉब्लम विद फाइंडिंग योर रीडर ऑल्सो. अगर आप अपने रीडर को नहीं समझेंगे और आप लिखना चाह रहे हैं, यू वॉन्ट टू कंटिन्यू राइटिंग, then it is absolutely essential for you to understand your reader. By saying that, I don't mean that your reader should start influencing your writing, but you should have a very clear demarcation that मैं इस किस्म के रीडर के लिए अपनी कहानियाँ या अपनी उपन्यास या अपनी नॉन फिक्शन लिख रहा हूँ या पोइट्री लिख रहा हूँ. तो readership is definitely growing. Social media is making readership reach beyond boundaries. There is huge interest in regional languages. There's huge interest in Hindi and other languages, which is very exciting. These are exciting times actually of major change coming in the kind of readers we are finding. The only problem is that you may not find them holding a physical book and reading. They're consuming that content from someplace else. There is a whole generation that's grown up on computers. There is my younger brother who's 12 years younger to me. He doesn't read a physical book. He reads it off, the Kindle. So the readership base is growing. The only difference that we may have to, from a publishing perspective or a writing perspective, understand is that we need to understand our reader better, which we have been struggling with.
Right.
One thing, again, one of the words that Lipika used there is a bit objectionable, coming from a old world and old school of thinking. A book is not a product. A book is not a product. I have had this conversation at another Lit Fest and with an author of the stature of Anita Nair and another author whom I would not name, who actually called a book a product and said that, like any product that we send out to the market, I send out a couple of chapters of my book to 100 readers and they come back with their inputs and then I develop from there. I said that's not a book. Where is the individuality? Isn't a writing, even 800 words of a piece that I write for a newspaper is my individual viewpoint. Can you imagine Albert Camus writing something like An Outsider and a sentence like my mother died yesterday or maybe today, with which it begins, being outsourced to 100 people as if it's some FMCG product? No, it is not. You cannot have a book. It's and also, like, I know readership is important, but I think for whatever you are writing, whether it's a 800 word piece for a column, whether it's a 2000 word long form journalism, whether it's a 30,000 word book like Outsider, Camus' Outsider, your first port of call, your first duty is to yourself as a writer. Am I being true? I do not give a damn about my book being readable or reachable to. First, am I being true to myself? Uske baad the marketing and whatever else. And if it's actually true to yourself, if you are, I see a lot of this, and particularly after I've joined OM and when I'm getting, earlier it used to be just primarily the music and cinema section. Again, there, when I started publishing in the music and cinema and culture section, a lot of the books that I published originally, and you marketed a lot of them, were first-time authors. People like Balaji and Anirudh and Akshay Manwani, they were authors who had not been, Gautam Chintamani, who had not been published before. They wrote their first books, and 3-4 of those books went on to win national awards. So, and they had been rejected by other publishers. It just took, and it was not easy, when I pitched Sahir Ludhianvi, I was told, 40 saal pehle mar gaya hai, who is going to read? Or when I pitched the book on R.D. Burman, the first thing, like 94, he died in 94, 20 years later, who is going to be interested? But then you believe in what the author has written. And in those books, I could see the passion of the author of everything that. Now, in sort of looking at all other genres of publishing at home that I have seen, I see a lot of them come from the thing that, you know, I am writing to make a bestseller. I am not writing to write. I am
Right.
writing to make a bestseller.
Right.
In fact,
Which is
there's a
not
new
bad.
trend. Sorry
which,
to
which is
interrupt.
not bad, but
There is a new trend. I'm writing to make it into an OTT or
yes,
films. Yeah,
absolutely.
that's-
And in fact,
Absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna
that's
touch upon
another
that.
that's another thing. You know, I have started for the first time in my life, 20 years of publishing. I have started receiving proposals in Excel sheets. Can you imagine a book coming in Excel sheets? Episode 1 of season 1. This will be the narrative. Episode 2 of season 1. This will be the narrative.
It's already been
I said,
chalked out, you
Yeah.
know,
So I said, you know,
episode-wise.
what are you writing? Are you writing for Netflix? I am not the person. I am here for the book. You know, if the book gets out there and scores like good books do, you know, just imagine Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay writing Pather Pachali for Satyajit Ray to make a film. No, he wrote it just because
he wanted to.
to write.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what, you know, it's
I think, sorry, that's also the difference between the classics that you mentioned, right? Because classics, they are widely read, but they were not written for an OTT, or they were not written keeping the reader in mind, right? So I think I will just want to take a different direction here, and I'm glad I didn't have to do the controversial task of bringing out the conflict between editorial and marketing. It brought itself out. But is there a sweet spot between writing for yourself and writing for the reader, keeping the reader in mind? We saw two different approaches that both of you spoke about. So, you know, can we bring the marketing and can we bring the editorial together and still keep the language, still keep the story intact in any way?
Oh, absolutely, and that's how we've had several bestsellers together. I mean, I, Dada and I take due credit for a lot of bestsellers that he's churned out, and I've worked with him on, and a lot of them have gone on to win the national award. But to answer your question, my the idea is not so. See, I have great reservation about. Knowing your reader well to start writing based on their requirement. That's what I had mentioned when I opened my statement. It means that you should be aware who your readers are. You can't. So, if say suppose I'm writing for the joy of writing, I also write for children. If I'm writing for the joy of writing, I should know that this is my limitation and this is my limited audience that I will reach out to. There are writers. The point I was trying to make was there are writers who feel that I've written a book and now it should sell 1 lakh copies. After all, you are converting it into the sales figures, no? At the end of the day, bestseller tag कब आता है जब आप इतने numbers achieve कर लेते हो? The idea is the times have changed. It's not about bestsellers anymore. It's about your profile building. It's about your brand building. It's about your personal branding. That is the shift today. So for your personal branding, it's not necessary to have a bestsellers tag there. It's important to understand your readers and audience, to connect with them, to know that you know how you're going to ensure that they keep coming back for your
Correct.
work.
Also to have your purpose in mind, right? Right. So, I mean, you need to know, why are you writing the book? Do you want to be a writer, or are you writing for personal branding? Sorry, I just
No, but you know, I would be the last person to limit a writer to start writing, keeping in mind that this is for my personal branding. There are lots of writers who do that.
Okay.
I work with a lot of writers, especially people in the business genre, writing in self-help genre. They're writing purely for their personal branding purposes. But there are genres where, you know, I think we can't do that. I mean, poetry is one such genre which is kosher. We cannot allow you to start thinking, अच्छा मैं personal branding के हिसाब से अब इस तरह की कविताएं लिखूंगा. It should be for the joy of writing. What you want to write and put out there, every one of us has a story to tell. And you should find your own way to tell that story. And that's again the marketing perspective, my only thing is that be real in what you want to achieve and have a purpose in mind, as you said, you know, that it should be a...
Right.
You know, one of the problems that I actually face is, you know, what she mentioned about poetry. Of late, in the last year and a half, I've been hearing a lot about fiction is dead. You know, like this is a subject I bring about at every conversation I have. And a couple of the top editors and agents, book agents in the country, a top editor and a top book agent have gone on record in leading publications to say fiction is dead, it does not sell. I have nothing against the business book or the self-help book. These are also valid genres. You sell them. But how can you tell me that fiction is dead?
Right.
Is imagination dead? Is there no place for imagination anymore? When you say fiction is dead, when a leading editor says that, and when a book agent says that, what's the signal you are giving? Right at the outset, the sales team in the organization will say, okay, ye to bikegi nahi. You know, and then you don't make any effort. Today, you know, like when we have a, say, an Amitabh Ghosh or a Shashi Tharoor writing a fiction, their brand, their particular kind of thing that they bring into it, the book will sell even without all the marketing resources being put behind it. But a new author or an unknown author writing a really damn good book will need the kind of effort behind marketing,
Absolutely.
which if we say fiction does not sell, will not be put into by the publishing industry. I by the publishing house. I personally know that from experience. Every time I go with a book that's fiction, and within fiction a short story. At the same time, if you look at social media, the two most thriving genres that people respond to most are poetry and short stories.
Absolutely.
And I am
Right.
told that short stories is a dead thing. Don't touch short stories. And I've just published one of our leading authors with a short story collection. You know, being a lover of lost causes, you do that. You know, but then if you actually say that right at the outset, aap bol dete ho, it's a self-prophecy thing. You know, like you are saying, fiction is dead, it won't sell. Sales will say, yaar, nahi bik rahi hai. They'll come, marketing will say, no, there's no agency to this. Kuch. But then find that, no?
Right.
Try and do that. You know,
Right.
I am guilty in many ways, in the sense of when I started publishing on cinema, and the first 8 years were all new authors, first time authors, doing a variety of books, and then Rishi Kapoor happened. And floodgates opened for celebrity publishing. Usse
Right.
pehle there was no celebrity publishing.
Right.
And then celebrity publishing became so, anybody with any kind of thing would come out with a book. And what has happened after that is, a good book on cinema, I can no longer convince any publisher to take that on. Today, I know for a fact that a book on R.D. Burman like that, or Akshay Manwani's Sahir, I would have immense problem pushing, because they are not celebrities. The celebrities are not alive to sell the book.
Absolutely. I think that's a problem that is happening everywhere, you know, relying on known names. It's not just in book publishing, but otherwise also, right? So, again, taking the example of platforms, if you have to invite a speaker, the first thing that you would do is look at their social media following. Or casting for a film or a television show has become so dependent on the social media followers that you have that commands the price that you can charge, right? But I'm glad that you touched on the media that one can use to market.
Even Litfest, for example, you know, like, I'm sure Litfest also, if I ask for an author to be in present at a Litfest, the first questions will be, will there be a celebrity attached to
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
panel? You know, so
Right. It's kind of become the thing to rely on, you know, to attract people, because there's so much going on and going around. So, taking off from that, now the marketing toolkit of an author, I'm sure, will look very different as compared to what it used to look like, the marketing effort that goes into it. So today you have book launches, you have bookshops, or you have, all these book places which have a dedicated space for hosting book launches, and they encourage that, they rent out that space. Earlier, perhaps what I can think of is you might put out an ad, maybe I could be wrong here, but you might put out an ad in a print medium, or you might talk about your book on radio. So that probably made your toolkit. But today it's much more wider, it's much more larger. So again, talking from a marketing perspective and an editorial perspective, and since you deal with a lot of traditional marketing methods, what's your take on how one should go about marketing or choosing the media to market their book so that it becomes a bestseller?
Would you like to share your experience? Okay. See, the fact of the matter is that you have to build on your strengths. Now, while we may not like the fact that a lot of books are, even writing books, writers are being made writers because they have a huge following. So, if somebody has a social media strength, then of course you should build on that. But there are every writer, every personality, every book has its own journey and has its own strengths. Sometimes the book overshadows the writer's personality because it's so strong in its content, the subject that it's writing on. So, as a marketer, whenever something comes to us, the first thing that we do is to do a SWOT analysis, a strength, weakness,
Okay.
opportunities, and threat analysis,
That's interesting.
and to see what will work for the book, whether it's the subject that we need to take it forward with, or the personality is so strong that we need to work around that and that the strength of that personality to take the book forward. And this is something that we have a very open conversation both with writers and publishers, that this is the route we take. Every book is different, it demands a different strategy. There are new marketing agencies who come with a structured a rate card कि हम ये
Plan,
करके आपको दे
right.
देंगे, but वो होता नहीं है because in the last 17 years of my experience, and I think the other will confirm that every book needs a very different treatment. You cannot create a standard one size fit all thing. So as I said, you have to work on the strengths, build up on the strengths. Of course, there'll be weaknesses. There'll be competition, especially in case of genres like politics. You'll suddenly see that as soon as we are nearing an election, there'll be 10 books coming on the same subject. How do you make yours stand out? And there are very interesting ways that publishers do. I mean, so first and foremost is to find inside news कि किसकी किताब कब schedule हो रही है.
Right.
But other than that, every book, even if it's on the same subject, will have something definitely. And this is why I always ask my colleagues in marketing, in any publishing houses, there are younger people joining in, that you must read to understand what is the strength that you are going to be able to market. So, to answer your question in short again, is that you have to build on the strengths, either of the writer or the book, and then try and see how you're going to work around the threats or the competition. And I think once you've done that, there is no reason that the book will not get the visibility that it demands.
Right. So I think it's the process in itself might take as long as writing the actual book, right? It's not the job of one night, or it's not an overnight thing, from what I understand. It has to involve as much effort as writing the actual book, right?
It has to be a sustained effort. People think कि किताब आ गई है, 1-1.5 महीने 2 महीने हमने लिट फेस्ट चले गए, हमने मीडिया में कर लिया कवरेज, हमने डिजिटल मार्केटिंग करा ली, but it doesn't work like that. It has to be a sustained effort. People are spending a lot of money in building their social media profiles, in building their followings. आजकल सब जो है फॉलोअर्स के बेसिस पे सारे डिसीजंस हो रहे हैं. वाई नॉट स्पेंड अ लिटिल टाइम इन अंडरस्टैंडिंग योर ओन स्ट्रेंथ्स एंड वीकनेसेस एंड सीइंग कि कहाँ ऐसा है जहाँ बगैर पैसे के भी यू कैन अचीव मच मोर देन what you are. So
I do think that publishers are like we have been we have sort of let the whole the ball drop there. Like I have been part of publishing decisions or editorial commissioning decisions where I've been told, author, if I've introduced a book and an author, how many followers, as if that's, or even I hope it's been said in joke, sort of, if it's a woman, I've been asked, is she good looking, like
sure.
because that's the kind
Yeah.
of like, will she be marketable, photogenically marketable, that's the kind of that's the reason we have had poetry with lines like our loins are roaring in Kargil. I've had submissions like that. I said that's almost Freudian, Freudian, so.
I mean, we've been talking about language all day, and this just adds on, right?
There are a lot of writers who have written their manuscripts and they come to me to, get help, seeking help getting it published. And the first thing I tell a lot of them is that write in the language you're comfortable in. आपकी सबसे अच्छी अभिव्यक्ति उस भाषा में होती है जिसमें आपकी पकड़ अच्छी हो. Don't write in English just because you want to be the next Chetan Bhagat and you want to write. Not that, everybody likes what probably he writes. But frankly, I think don't force yourself, force an alien language just because you feel there is bigger readership there. Find your own reader. That's what I said.
Right,
Find your niche and find your own reader.
In fact, Chetan Bhagat is just about a perfect case study of what could have happened. His first 3 books were like the 5 point someone or something, and the next couple of follow-ups to that, where really, he broke through. He made reading in English democratic. There are people who wouldn't read in English, who started reading because he made the language accessible.
Right.
But then after a point, I think every writer owes it to himself, most of all, to develop his craft. With Chetan Bhagat, that didn't happen. He just had found the easy way, sort of, and kept peddling that. So that, I did an article on this. By the time he came out with his 3rd book, The 3 Mistakes of My Life, I actually wrote an article saying that, yes, his 3rd book is his 3rd mistake. So like, we owe it to the reader. He was in a position where he could have influenced the reading of a generation. He actually influenced the reading of a generation.
True.
He could have done that with a better writing. He didn't. He also went the OTT film route, because every book after that was, you could make out this is a screenplay posing as a novel.
Absolutely.
No, but I think at the time when he started writing, yes, I mean, he's very right. He democratized the language, and since English was aspirational in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, he made it accessible. But I also feel in the current times, now almost a decade later, I feel, it's even more imperative that you write in the language, because all regional languages are thriving. There is slowly a sense of, taking pride in where your roots and where you are from and what you want to read and write in. So, coming back to the point that don't send manuscripts just, because you have an idea and you want to put it across in the language that may not be a comfort language for you.
Right.
The psychology of the times, like with the pandemic and all, there's been a drastic change in the way we approach anything, with the generation of mobile users and all of that. Our attention span has, like, I've seen that in leading magazines, which I write for. There was a time I wrote 3,000, 4,000 word essays on cinema and all. And I was actually told, no, cut it down to 800 words, 900 words, because anything that goes beyond one swipe of a mobile phone is not holding attention. Now that's very tragic, like instead of actually battling that and actually ensuring that you get your readers to read a little more, lengthening your, giving them more, you're actually bowing down to that,
Right.
like, and there.
But I think to add to it, it's now that myth is also breaking. These were the early learning signs for
Possibly,
a digital
yeah,
platform
possibly.
to say that you cut down your article to 800 words. Today they are going back to long forms. People who want short forms, they have the alternative to read the story in short and then go
Right.
back and look at the long forms. So there are a lot of myths, and that's why I started this conversation with the fact that these are exciting times. There are a lot of myths that are being broken. The myth that poetry doesn't sell, the myth that fiction doesn't sell.
Right.
I think it's a myth. It's just that you need to, one size will not fit all. The way to market and put your books out there for the reader will change. Poetry will not go the routine way. Fiction
true,
or non-fiction will be read or received.
I think, that's where our wisdom lies, in understanding that one size really doesn't fit all, because it depends on the genre that you're writing in. It depends on the language that you're writing in. It depends on who you're writing for. Albeit briefly, you have to understand who you're writing for and why you're writing it. But I think this is going to be so subjective for every writer that you really can't say, if I've done this, it'll work for you also. Or if I've done that, that'll work for you also. So I noticed the time. Just one last question. And then, if time allows, we'll probably have one or two from the audience as well. But does writing in a certain style, in a certain way, in a certain language restrict the visibility of your book? And I say that specifically in terms of our country, because we have such a diverse population. And we spoke about tier 2, tier 3 cities. So there, the psyche is different. There, people are different. So for instance, when I receive an anchoring brief, a lot of the times in in smaller towns or in regions where the predominant language is not English, I'm told that you talk in Hindi 90% of the time. So is that a similar case for books? Does that restrict your visibility in any way? Or, it doesn't have to be a consideration?
I think it does. Like we are what readers in a metro city readership from a, for want of a better word, privileged or a convent English educated background readership will be primarily different from a 2-tier 3-tier city reader background. I think regional publishing in that way, a Surinder Mohan Pathak is as popular among Hindi readers as a Premchand is.
Right.
I don't think we have managed that in the English. Somebody who addresses both the profiles. I don't think that's. But at the same time, we must realize that most books, like I'm not talking about the Amitabh Ghoshas and the Shashi Tharoors, which begin with huge print runs, or like even at Chetan Bhagat, the print runs start off at 3-4 lakh copies, or an Amish. But I'm talking about the general sort of the mid list that I'm talking about. They start off with about 2,000 to 3,000 copies. I refuse to believe that there are not 2,000 readers in this country,
Right.
in English.
Right.
And if out of those 2,000 copies a marketing person can sell 1,400 or 1,200, the book breaks even. So as long as a book breaks even, why can't we have fiction? Why can't we have poetry? There's this girl that that Juggernaut published. I was speaking just before our session, Mehak Goel. Failure to make round rotis. You must have her at one of your fests going ahead.
Sure.
And she must have been rejected by so many publishers. And I know that, and Juggernaut saw merit, published it. She reached out to me. I was, because I'm also pretty dismissive about modern poetry, and anything goes sort of poetry. And I actually read her. She thrust a copy of the book to me, and I read, and I actually reached out saying that I loved it, and I did the launch for the book, and I'm so thrilled to see that in 3-4 months she has reprinted a poetry book being reprinted in English. So of course there is a readership, and a lot of that has to do with marketing. She has been very, very good with how she has marketed the book.
I'll give you a slightly different perspective, and that's again coming from my take as a marketer. That you will have equal, or if not more, number of takers in regional and local languages if we start making it cool. You'll see that there are a lot of Hindi poets who are being read by usually the so-called English readers,
Right.
because they've made it cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I think that's where we are missing overall in the publishing industry. I think that effort to make something look cool. It's even today, English takes the forefront, and all the other languages are not given an equal stand. Even in terms of everything from the organizational structure to the resources to the budgets. I think the most fascinating sessions as I started the conversation with were on Punjabi. Because,
Right.
we have to, everybody who is at some position should begin to influence the thought process and start making the regional languages look cool. The moment you do that, you'll have lot more sales coming in from regional. Even today, there are books that we don't know about who sell much more than even the biggest of the sellers in English, but we are not aware of them.
Right.
Because they are in regional languages. Marathi is such a rich this thing. Gujarati is such a rich language to
I was
publish
speaking to
in.
the DC publishers, and
Malayalam.
he actually said, "What are you saying, Dada? Our authors don't have to work anywhere. They make their livelihood in writing from royalties." And I said, "Yeah, please tell us
This
how
is
to do
another
that."
myth, This is another
Right,
myth. This is
yeah.
a myth.
I think we've opened quite a Pandora's box here, and the clock. the
And you
clock goes
all
on.
will have to stick
I
to
know,
it.
I know, for sure. But at least let's have 2 questions from the audience, very brief ones, very concise, and we'll have our panelists answer them. So, in case there are any, you can just raise your hands, and we'll pass on the mic to you. Any questions in the audience? Great. So I don't have to.
I think Kabir Bedi yesterday told me it's a serious business. Where he must have,
Yeah.
we were having a chat about the session that I was to have with you. So he said, yeah, publishing is a serious business. It's so serious that people have no questions at all.
I know, right? But ma'am has
there
a
you
question right in the front. So could we get the mic to ma'am, please?
Hi, I'm Sharmita. The question I have is, has there been a book that you have published for whatever reason which you didn't hope that it would do that well? And is there a book where you hoped that it was going to be a real big success and it didn't? And why?
It's a wrong question to ask both of us because I think Dada will have lot many more, but I alone have, say, worked with over 1,500 writers all across the world, and a lot of them have had books which have been successes and flops. But yes, one story I must tell, and that's a classic story because for that we won the first marketing award when I was at Harper, and that was Aravind Adiga's first book. And we had bought the rights for it to be published in India. And nobody was confident because the amount of advance that had gone, will they be able to recover it? And I recall the Man Booker was to happen in October. And even the market had given a very tepid response to the book. But we went all out, I think all guns behind it, we set aside the kind of budgets nobody had imagined before that. I had to literally fight it out with Mr. Puri, who we had a joint venture with India Today to get that budget approved. But frankly, even before he won the Booker, and we had aimed, hum 20,000 copies kar lenge. It was a hardback, $4.99. I still recall because there were lots and lots of reservations from all quarters, especially the salespeople, because initially their response was not very encouraging. And even before we hit October, we had done 50,000 copies. And
For the
October,
next
as
8
soon
years, we
oh
had
yeah,
our
and they're
bonuses came out of Arvind Adiga.
Exactly.
In fact, I think I remember I was in
so
school
that was
at that
one
point of time.
example, a classic
Yeah.
example where we were not very confident about the book, but it went on to. But I think somewhere in that not having confidence, there were a few people who just stuck to it.
I
they were,
have one which, of course, I won't name the author, I won't name anything because when something does not work out, it does not work out and you can't name. You can't name names. But there was this, and this is the kind of thought process that goes into ruining the trade. So there's this huge star who was signed up for a book. By the time the bidding ended on the book through various, the figure had reached 75 lakhs with the kind of percentage royalties that I haven't had, and even after that, 8 people from the organization were flown in because the star wanted to meet the team marketing. So even before anything had been done, even before the contract had been signed or, the ink had dried, a few lakhs had gone down the drain in marketing. Today, it's 6 years to the day, and not a line of the book has been written.
That's commendable. Very interesting. No, but thank you so much for that conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as
No, it
I
was a
enjoyed putting it
pleasure,
together.
and I'll just take a minute more to specially mention this because I think it's only ma'am's conviction to bring a subject like this on this platform. Usually, literature festivals are about literature.
Yeah.
But very, very rarely do we have people talking
business
about
of
the
literature.
business of
Business of
literature.
literature, correct.
And I do hope, and thank you, Sumita ji, for giving us this opportunity. I think it was a fantastic audience, and it's always a pleasure being with,
Thank you
sharing
so
the
much.
stage with
Thank you,
Shantanu.
Niharika, and
Thank you
Deepika.
so
Ma'am,
much.
thank you so much. And that somebody in editorial can even talk about marketing, all credit to you.
Well, I'm glad we brought the two different perspectives and sides of it together, you know. Otherwise, we might have had a lopsided conversation where it was all marketing, but I'm glad it was both editorial and marketing so that we get both of it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shantanu. And thank you so much, Lipika. Thank you so much. And with that, I finally return to my original role as Sutradhar. So, ye mic, let me just go and put it back. And that is where the podium mic comes back to me. So, ladies and gentlemen, our next session is going to be about poetry, and it's imperative that I open it with this line, which goes something like this. कि दिल की बातें हर किसी को समझ नहीं आती, दिल की बातें हर किसी को समझ नहीं आती, सिर्फ उन्हें है आती जिनके दिल में मोहब्बत घर कर जाती. और क्योंकि बात नहीं है तो परिचय देने का अंदाज भी नया होना चाहिए. नई ऊर्जा के साथ मैं अब आमंत्रित करना चाहूँगी शैली विज जी को टू लीड यू ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट सेशन.